Welcome to Satsang with Samvara. Let's begin with meditation. So today, I'd like to speak to you about self-compassion. You're a wonderful person. You have to know that. We all have Buddha nature. Our nature is enlightenment. So when we have bad ideas about ourselves, limited ideas, when we suffer disturbing thoughts and emotions, that's not who we really are. Enlightenment is within you. So, at the same time, we suffer. We have difficulties. We have pain. We have hardships. And since you're such a great person, and yet you suffer, we start with bodhicitta for the self. Bodhicitta for yourself. There was a man who learned the teachings of bodhicitta, and he was in the supermarket, and he saw this example of compassion that was very moving to him. There was a woman with a toddler, and the toddler was, in the cart and was just making a mess. So first, he's walking down the cereal aisle, and the toddler opens up some box of juice and spills it all over himself. And then the woman, takes out a napkin, cleans him off, and then says, or it's a she. He's like, there, Jan, it's okay. You're going to be all right. Cleans her off, caring for her. And then they go down a little bit further, and then the toddler starts screaming, making all crying and all this noise. And then she says, there, Jan, it's okay. We're almost done. We'll be out of here soon. It's going to be all right. And then the toddler becomes a little bit more quiet. Then a little bit later, the toddler picks up, a jar of pickles that's in the cart and throws it on the ground. It breaks, and clean up on aisle 3. And then she's like, it's okay, Jan. We'll get through this. We're, just one more thing to get, and then we'll go. And then they go to the checkout. And then at the checkout, the toddler starts screaming, making a mess, going crazy. And she says, there, Jan, it's okay. We're done now, and we can go home and take a nap. And then after the checkout, this man goes over to her and says, I just have to say, I'm so impressed. You're so compassionate to little Jan here. And then she says, oh, this is Jennifer. I'm Jan. That is self-compassion. We start off looking at self-compassion and we're like, isn't that selfish? Sitting there going, worrying about myself. I'm worrying about myself, worrying about my needs, worrying about my pain. Isn't that? No. When you're compassionate to yourself, you're relieving your suffering so that you can help another. So when you're learning bodhicitta, when you're learning compassion, you have to begin with compassion for yourself. If you're not compassionate to yourself, then you're not in a proper foundation for being compassionate to another. It's funny. There, Jan. It's okay. We can go home and take a nap. But it's often that we're horrible to ourselves sometimes. We're not compassionate. We say horrible things to ourselves. Like if you have a friend, and your friend, has a breakup, and they're suffering, you'll say, "Hey, it's okay, you're going to find the right guy, and he'll love you for who you are." And if you break up and have a bad breakup, you sit there and tell yourself, "I'll never be loved. I'm horrible. It's terrible. I'm cursed." If your friend loses their job or something, you'll say, "You're really good. You get back out there. You're going to do it." But if you lose your job, you'll be like, "I'm never going to get a job again." You sit there telling yourself horrible things, nasty judgments, horrible ideas. Even your worst enemy wouldn't come up with a lot of what you tell yourself. Your worst enemy is all like, "You're better at it than me." So you have to tell yourself good things. Chuang-Tzu was a Taoist master, and he observed monkeys. He talked about monkeys a lot. Anyway, he saw this monkey, and the monkey went to a beehive because it wanted to get some honey. And it puts his hand in, and then he gets stung. And he goes, "Ouch." Then he puts his hand in again, and he gets stung again. "Ouch." And he keeps doing it. And Chuang-Tzu says, that's just like people, people's thoughts. You do something that doesn't work, and it hurts, and you do it over and over and over. That was his judgment of people's bad thoughts. And then eventually the monkey, climbs down from the tree, gets away from the honey. And then another monkey comes over and starts taking, the little stingers out and taking care. And he says, this is just like enlightened action. It is taking care of someone, something that works and creates healing. So you have to be aware of what you're saying to yourself. Don't say to yourself things that hurt you and are dysfunctional. Do things that are helpful, constructive, and that cause healing. Yeah, also, sometimes we do things for others that we kind of wouldn't even do for ourselves. But you got to do stuff for yourself. Like, I was visiting this one student, and we were in his kitchen. I hadn't been to his place before, but he was telling me that he was at his mother's, and his mother wanted to take some things out of the office and put it in storage in the garage. So she said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he did all this work and put things in boxes, put it in the garage. And I'm like, "Oh," and he's like, "Yeah, I was just like, it was great. I felt very selfless helping my mother." And I said, "Good." And I noticed there was a box in the corner. And I said, "Well, what's in that box?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I haven't fully unpacked yet." I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, "How long have you lived here?" And he's like, 4 years. So you have to take care of yourself. You got to do things for yourself. And others. We're going to get to the others. But we're talking about self-compassion. You have to be compassionate to yourself. Say good things to yourself. You're worth it. Go love yourself. And take action. Make sure that your life is good. Self-compassion. Yeah, so in Bodhisattva, we really have to start with having compassion for ourselves. You can't go around doing everything for everybody else. It's not balanced. And then if you're only focused on compassion for others, then you suffer. You end up getting out of balance. You're like, I'm always helping everybody else. I just give and I give. They take and they take, right? I'm suffering. And that's what happens if you don't have self-compassion as a foundation for your practice. So you have to consider, the things that cause you suffering. And you have to have compassion for yourself because it gives you space, gives you understanding, gives you peace. And then from there, you can have compassion for others. So for this next month, I want you to practice bodhicitta after your meditation. I want you to practice compassion for yourself. And we're going to do a little practice of compassion for ourselves. First of all, we recognize that no matter what our thoughts are, what our feelings are, all the crazy stuff going on in our lives, that deep down inside, we have Buddha nature. That the true essence of our being is good. All right? And then, go ahead and sit up nice and straight. I want you to bring to mind an area of suffering, of pain, of difficulty, something that you suffer from. Situation, a relationship. And I want you to, when you practice self-compassion, I want you to put your hands over your heart, because this is compassion for you. So you bring this thing to mind. And you recognize that this is suffering for you. We don't go into the story, we just see that this is suffering. It's hard, it's difficult, it's painful. We can't get out of it. It's suffering. And then we recognize that there are others who suffer the same thing, and sometimes a lot worse. And then we practice Tonglen for ourselves, taking and sending with the breath. So when we inhale, we take away our suffering, and we see that we are free from suffering. And as we exhale, we give ourselves light, enlightenment, and we see that we are a Buddha. We see our Buddha nature, that we're happy and free. So we're going to sit in silence for just about a minute, where we're going to practice that exchange, taking our suffering so that we're free of it, and giving ourselves light. Let's begin. Very nice. So for the month to come, after your meditation practice, spend some time in bodhicitta for yourself. Bodhicitta is not indulging. It's not a fancy way of kind of jumping into your pain and just, having a pity party and getting like some fancy party hat. Bodhicitta is relief of suffering. It's not reinforcing, oh yeah, I'm really bad, I'm really sad, yeah. So it's not indulging, right? It's not going into a limitation and going, oh, I can't get out of it, I can't get out of it. Bodhicitta is a way beyond the self, beyond suffering. Buddha said, there is suffering in life. That's the first noble truth, the first thing he taught. So, when you suffer, you have to realize, wow, Buddha was right. Wait a second. And then that gives you momentum to follow the teachings beyond suffering. All Buddhas, all enlightened beings have suffered. They had the same, difficulties, hardships, bad thoughts, bad feelings, bad situations. And by following the teachings of enlightenment, they got through it. I remember myself when I was early on in the study. I was really bad at meditation. I was like, everyone else can meditate, but I can't. I was really bad at technology. I was like learning to program, and I was like, I'm not learning this stuff. So I sat there and I was like, oh, poor me. I'm trying to learn meditation, but it's not working. I'm trying to learn computer programming, but I can't. So I had to have compassion for myself. And I said, I'm just going to, have compassion for myself, taking and sending, and I'm just going to sit here and try and meditate. Just give it my best effort. Because if I said, I'm bad at meditation, it's never going to work, and I just give up, then I would never have learned to meditate, which is the greatest thing in the world. Meditation is a beautiful way for you to have compassion for yourself. Because when you have all those thoughts and feelings going on, you just torment yourself. But in meditation, you slowly learn to still your mind. And then there's no thoughts. I remember I was learning to meditate, and before I meditated, I was just thinking all these bad thoughts and having all these bad feelings. Then I'd sit and try and meditate. And at least while I was trying to meditate, I felt a little better. So I started calling meditation damage control. And for a long time in the study, I really felt that I was very bad at meditation. But eventually, I mastered meditation. So it can happen to you. You can find your Buddha nature. And then, of course, in job yoga, I was trying to learn computer programming. I was horrible at it. I went to a special computer school. I guess you call them boot camps. And I flunked out. And I was like, oh gosh, I'll never learn computers. And then I just kept working on it, and then I learned it. Then I became a good computer programmer. I was doing artificial intelligence systems on Wall Street. So all Buddhas, all enlightened beings, started in a condition of suffering. But when you follow the teachings, it leads you to mastery, and it leads you out of suffering, which is a good thing. So you have to start with yourself. You got to start caring for yourself and developing yourself. That's self-compassion. That's what Buddha said. He said, hey, you want to help people? Master your mind. Once you master your mind, you will naturally be a force of compassion and support for others. But when your mind is turbulent, then your help for others might not be help. You might think it's help, but it might not be help. So he said, master your mind first. There was a student who was working at a nonprofit, and he was miserable. I think his nonprofit was like saving the world or feeding the hungry or something like that. And he's like, I'm passionate about, saving the world. So that's why I work at this nonprofit. And then he's like, but I don't make a lot of money. I'm suffering all of these things for having no money and stress for bills and things like that. And having a really hard time. And also at work, I'm struggling. I don't like this, I don't like that. Everything's really hard, everything's difficult. And the world isn't saved, so what? And so he says, what should I do? And I said, well, your problem is that you're trying to save everybody else, but you're not saving yourself. So when you give yourself compassion, take care of yourself, make sure that you're strong, balanced, not stressed, then you're able to help in much more profound ways. I have an example of that in the Enlightenment Workbook. I'm like, if you see someone, there's a first rule of rescue. If you see someone drowning, you got to be a good swimmer if you want to help them. Because if you go over and you're not a good swimmer, they're going to grab you and you're both going to go down. So you have to make sure you're a good swimmer. You have to be a strong swimmer in order to help someone else. And taking the time to become strong, focusing on yourself, is something that then makes you powerful, a force of compassion. Compassion is elevating always. Compassion is constructive always. So yeah, if you just go over to someone and say, oh, you're sad, well, I'm sad too. There was this, there were 3 people who went and learned Bodhicitta. Then, after learning about Bodhicitta, they're walking through the town, and the first one comes upon this poor old woman who's hungry and cold. And he looks at her and says, oh, poor woman, she's hungry and cold. And then he goes, okay, oh, what a poor lady, what a terrible thing. And then he ends up sitting down next to her and just crying. Poor lady. The second one comes over and sees her, and he says, wow, this poor lady, she needs a lot of help. Then Like, there's just people walking down the street, and he's like, why won't you help her? You're an asshole. You should go and help her. Why are you guys not helping her? Then he sits down next to her, and it's just like, people aren't helping. What's wrong with humanity? That's what we do. And then the third person comes over, and he goes, gives her some food and a warm blanket. He did something constructive from his recognition of her suffering. So you got to do things that are constructive for yourself, that are positive for yourself. Yeah. Compassion, you have to look at it. Compassion is always constructive. Now, compassion it's a bigger thing than when we're talking about self-compassion. It's more than self-esteem or self-worth. I would say that self-esteem is the way of the ego, and self-compassion is the way of selflessness. Self-esteem has problems. There could be suffering in self-esteem. There could be, personal power goes up and down. There's always obstacles. There's always difficulties, hardships, limitations. With self-esteem, there's win and loss. So if you do something good, you go, da-da-da-da-da, I'm happier. And then something bad happens to you, and then you're all like, oh. Self-esteem is kind of that overall judgment of, I'm good or I'm bad. And it goes up and down depending on your experiences. You could be doing something really good, and you're all, I'm great. And then something bad happens, and you're all, oh, it's horrible. There was this businessman named Peter Castle, an English fellow, good friends with Prince Charles. Really, he is, or was. And he was, very wealthy businessman, very successful, did a lot of real estate deals, had an oil company. And he just had all of these great wins. And he was like, yay, I'm happy. Yeah, this is great. And then a big multi-million-dollar property, he lost the deal or something like that. And then he kept on having other bad things. His oil company went out of business. And then he did some more real estate deals that went bad. So he had like 4 or 5 or 6 bad things happen. And he was miserable. He was like in a crisis. Who am I? Why is everything going bad? And he got so upset, he walked into the London Underground and threw himself in front of a train. And I'm all like, now, he did have some bad, real estate deals and stuff, but he was still a multi-millionaire. It's just that he tied his sense of self, his self-worth, to what was happening for him. Another one, Dyson, I think his name's Richard Dyson. Dyson, another English chap, he came up with this idea to make a better vacuum cleaner. You guys have one? And he was working on it for years, and he made this vacuum cleaner that was, didn't have a bag. Remember those vacuums? You could fit a little bag in there. And this was, bagless. Now, when he kept on trying to sell it in England, people were like, it doesn't have a bag. So they didn't get it. And he was trying and trying and trying, and it wasn't working, and he was just miserable for years. And he just was like, living with his wife, who was an art teacher, and they were just scraping by. And he kept on going out, door-to-door sales with his vacuum cleaner. It's a better vacuum cleaner. People are all, well, it doesn't have a bloody bag. And he's like, I know. That's actually good. And then some contact of his said, I'm going to Japan. Maybe I'll bring some of your vacuum cleaners and see if we can sell it there. And he's like, okay. And so they sold in Japan. And then he kept selling, grew the Japanese market. It was huge. And then he won this international prize for invention. And then the English were like, oh, let's take another look at this. And then they were like, oh, it's great. So he was sitting there being miserable with his vacuum cleaner because it sucked. He made the first Buddhist vacuum cleaner with no attachments. But then after he had that win, so he was very, very sad and miserable. Then after he had that success, then he started inventing new things. He made 5,000 inventions. And my favorite one is the air blade. When you wash your hands, you go to that thing. Because we used to have that thing. It was this like little white thing with a, you push the button in it, and it kind of like a little warm breeze, and you're sitting there going, I'm gonna miss my flight, but my hands will be dry in like an hour. And then the Dyson Airblade comes out because of Dyson, and then whoosh, whoa, it's like magic. But he too, he was like, he had a losing streak and he felt bad, and then he had a winning streak, and then he felt good. So there's always the ups and downs. Or there was a 3 Michelin star chef in France, and then he got the first star, the second star, the third star, and he was like, yeah. And then after a few years, Michelin said, we're going to take 1 star away. And he's all, oh! And he was horribly upset. He killed himself. Yeah. And that's what happens when you pin your self-worth to what happens in your life. See, that's why self-compassion is different. If horrible things happen to you, there's more reason to practice compassion. You're like, oh, good, I can practice more. Just kidding. I'm looking for bad things so I can practice compassion. No, you got enough. You don't have to look for more. Yeah. But with self-compassion, you get the personal power of self-esteem, but you don't have the pitfalls of self-esteem. When bad things happen, we practice compassion. When good things happen, we practice compassion. We're always, anywhere where we find suffering, we do taking and sending. It's a profoundly more wholesome experience. And it's a way where there's no obstacles and limitations. Because when we have obstacles and limitations, we use them as a practice of compassion. It's funny, when we suffer, we're like, oh, I'm suffering. We're thinking, oh my God, something's wrong with me, I'm cursed, there's a major malfunction. And then we go, no, the truth of life is that there's suffering. And I practice compassion. This is the way to go beyond suffering. There is suffering, but then the pathway of enlightenment, the Dharma, Bodhisattva, is that way through. It's very bright. Yeah. So you have to practice self-compassionate mindfulness. So you all have gone through the Enlightenment workbook. You've identified your mind, your thoughts, your patterns, And this is basic mindfulness. But now we're moving to a new mindfulness practice, which is self-compassion. Bodhicitta. So from now on, when you're practicing mindfulness, when you see yourself hurting, you start to have compassion for yourself. It's very powerful. So Buddha said, he was sitting there one day before he was enlightened, and he's all, guess what? Sometimes I have thoughts that are good and make me feel good. Sometimes I have thoughts that are just don't make me feel anything. But then I have thoughts that hurt, make me feel bad. Then he said, I'm going to stop having thoughts that make me feel bad. Then he did it, right? He was pretty advanced to just decide that. But we're going to start observing our thoughts in terms of, does this make me suffer or not suffer? So when you have a thought, like you might have a desire, I got to get a red sports car. And you might say, this thought actually creates something in me that hurts. I feel like I'm missing something, that I need it to be happy. And that thought makes me suffer. So you have to say, oh, okay, let me give myself compassion for that thought. So look at your thoughts, and when you're thinking them, start to say, am I suffering because of this thought? And when you find suffering, have compassion for yourself. Yeah, you don't get caught in the karma. You just have compassion for yourself. So if you're at work and your boss yells at you and you start feeling bad, I'm not a good employee, I'm going to get fired, you start looking at that story and those thoughts and you say, whoa, these thoughts are making me suffer. And you go, look, I feel worthless and I feel stupid. And then you say, okay, so I'm feeling these things. This is suffering. You got to get out of the story and just understand what you're feeling. And then say, besides this whole story, I'm just going to have compassion for myself. The difficult things that occur to you occur because you're having a bad relationship with what's happening. But compassion is a healthy relationship with what's happening. It's very powerful. I had a student who was a consultant at some healthcare company, project manager, and was there for 5 or 6 months, and was hired to do a certain thing. And then, after a few months, there was a meeting with the CEO and the COO, my student's boss, and they went into this meeting, and the CEO was yelling at the student's boss, you made this mistake, this mistake, this mistake. And then the boss said, it was the consultant. I hired this guy to do all that stuff, but he made a mess out of everything. And so then the CEO yelled at him, and the COO yelled at him, and everybody in the executive team was all like, oh, you're a jerk, man. You messed up everything. And then the CEO fired him on the spot, had security come up, walk him out. He had to walk out in front of the team he was leading for 6 months, with his little box. Security is walking him out. So during that time, he's sitting there like, he's like, oh, you liar. I didn't do that. It's your fault. You're throwing me under the bus. He was thinking all of these thoughts, and he was upset, and he was hurt. And then he went, wait, I got to do self-compassion. So when he would think "You liar," he would be hurt. So he would say, I'm going to give myself space, compassion for that. Yeah, I feel hurt, but I'm going to give myself compassion for that. And then he was able to go through this humiliating experience just evenly. He didn't lose energy. He didn't suffer. He was just like, well, these things happen, I suppose. And, I care for myself. And he was able to go through a really tough thing in an even way. So he didn't lose personal power. And then he was able to rebound and a week later had another great job. See, but if you get so mad and point fingers and blame and you're angry and everything's horrible, it brings your attention and your awareness down. Your personal power goes down. And you suffer. And then it's harder to get another job. So observe your thoughts, because when you're thinking, it's that person's problem, then you start to suffer because of what you're judging, what you're seeing, what you're thinking, your relationship with what's going on. If your relationship is even, I'm hurt, then I have compassion for my hurt. Not, he did this wrong, she did that wrong. It's a much better way to be. It's a kind of detachment. Because if you're all stuck in the story, the thoughts, blaming, cause and effect, and all caught up in that, you're caught up in your karma. But compassion gives you space. It frees you from the ups and downs of the karmas of the mind. There's another one. A student was at a company, and he was the best programmer on the team. And then a tech lead position opened up, and he didn't get the promotion. Another guy got the promotion, but he was a better tech lead. He would have been a better tech lead. He was the right guy. He had the right skills, but he didn't get the promotion, and he got mad. And then he was like blaming and story and all this stuff. Then he was like, okay, wait, compassion for myself. So he did a sitting session, and then he was able to be detached from the karma and look at the situation. And he was like, I am a better programmer, and I would be a better tech lead. But the other guy who got the promotion is a better communicator. He speaks up in meetings, and I'm just kind of like quiet. And management appreciates that. So he said, if I want to, move up in the organization, I need to communicate. So he started going to meetings, speaking up, and communicating well. Then a higher position opened up, like director of technology. And then he got that position over the other guy, because he was a better developer. He was a better technologist. But it's because he had the ability to detach from the karma of thoughts, to have compassion for himself, that he was able to see what was really going on. Because when you're sitting there thinking, bad, 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 him, that, this, when you're thinking that, your awareness narrows. When you have compassion, your awareness opens, and you can see more. And there's always a way for enlightenment and success. So observe your thoughts. When a thought arises and you say, does this make me suffer? Yeah, this doesn't make me feel good. Have compassion. Your awareness will open, and you'll see that that little problem is a huge problem. Isn't such a huge problem. And that you're able to go beyond it. Compassion for the self. People, when they're practicing mindfulness, have to detach from personal history. The past, we have a powerful saying, the past is dust, just let it go, right? Because a lot of people sit there and think horrible thoughts over and over. They're just the same thoughts. It's like the monkey and the honey, right? So you have to let the past go. Thoughts of pain of the past hurt over and over, again and again, if you let yourself indulge in thinking about the pain of the past. Like, there was this one woman who was talking to me about a bad relationship, and her boyfriend he said horrible things to her, and she's just like, I keep thinking about him yelling at me and saying these things, and is it true, and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, whether it's true or not, stop thinking about it. It's a horrible thing. You waste so much energy holding on to this pain of the past that you can just say, what does it mean? Nothing. The past is dust. Let it go. Yeah, don't get caught in cycles of personal history, her story. You gotta let it go. The past is dust. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself a chance to grow. I had another student. He was, getting a degree in technology, and he was taking an advanced mathematics course, and he flunked, and he was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then I guess it was the summer, he had like weeks before retaking the class, and he was just sitting there telling himself, this is too hard, I can't do it. This is too hard, I can't do it. When you're thinking of pain and trouble of the past, you start creating limitations that you really believe in. And I told him, just, have compassion for yourself, but stop thinking that thought. Start thinking, how can I do this? And then, of course, he succeeded. He passed the course. And then there's worrying about the future. So a lot of time we're sitting there going, I got a bill to pay, or I got to do this thing at work, or I'm going to have to talk to this person about something unpleasant. And when we're thinking about the future, we're bringing our attention into a place of kind of fear, anxiety, concern. It wastes energy. So when you start thinking about the future, you have to say, no. Just be here and give yourself compassion for that worry. So there's this girl, and she was sitting there, when's my boyfriend going to text me? Why hasn't he texted me? She's sitting there just stressing out and waiting for a text. And then she finally she's like, I know what's going on. He's seeing another girl. That's why he's not texting me. He's with her right now. And she's just making this whole worry up in her head. And then she found out later, well, first she texted him and said, you're an asshole. And then she broke up with him on Facebook. Okay, and then later she finds out that he was in a car accident, and he was unconscious. And then she was all, oh. Now, if she had compassion for herself, she would be like, why hasn't he texted me? I'm thinking he's with another girl. Okay, wait. Give myself compassion. Don't worry about things. Maybe he's not with another girl. Maybe he was just in a horrible car accident and everything's fine. When you're going through the thoughts of the past and the thoughts of the future, you miss the moment, the opportunities of the moment. And a lot of people do this all the time, though. They're going from the past to the future, past to the future. It's funny. They do it a lot while they're driving. I'm all time travelers. It's true. It's like you're sitting at your desk, going over an argument you had with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and then you knock your glass of water down, and then it's your favorite glass, and it breaks in half. You're like, oh man, why did I do that? I'm so sad, that's my favorite glass. I wonder if I'm going to be able to glue it together. And then you stand up to get it, and you're like, maybe I can glue it, and then there's a banana peel. And you're like, maybe I can glue it, and you slip, and you fall, boom. And you're like, next time I'm going to take this banana peel and throw it in the garbage. I should have seen this banana peel. Why didn't I see it? And then you put your hands on the glass and cut yourself. And then you go, that's going to leave a mark. I wonder if it's going to be a scar. And then you stand up and hit your head on the desk. When your attention is caught in the past and the future, you're not aware of what's going on. So don't live a life of a comedy of errors. Just a comedy. Could be a romantic comedy. You're like, hey. For me, it would be like a horror comedy. I'm like, ah! Or sci-fi comedy. Because they're out there. So, be in the moment. Hey, let's be in the moment together. Sit up nice and straight. We're going to sit for a meditation. Focus on the heart. We'll sit for one song. And I like you to just be aware. Aware of yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, and have a disposition of compassion for yourself. Just be present in this moment. Be aware of yourself and be open. Don't give yourself a hard time. Have compassion. Have a feeling of compassion. So we'll just sit with focus on the heart just for one song. Let's begin. It's a beautiful way. Compassion. Always have only a joyful mind. This is the 21st aphorism of the pith teachings of Bodhisattva and mind training. Always have only a joyful mind. And you're like, oh, that sounds cool. In a world like this, we got wars, we got politics, we got the job in the morning, we got all these stresses. How can you have a joyful mind? Got mean people. How can you have only a joyful mind? By fostering only a joyful mind. Even if you didn't have the mean person who you blame, you would still make the world a misery. Even if you didn't have the job in the morning, you would still make the world a misery. The mind, so when you're like, oh, the world's so crazy. No, you're crazy. It's not the world that's crazy. It's your mind. Your mind will make a misery out of any situation. So, therefore, we take every situation and bring a joyful mind. Even if it's difficult, a joyful mind. And it's difficult. A joyful mind. Yes. Yeah, my teacher said, always be positive. Because beneath this thin surface of pleasure and pain, there's endless ecstasy. Stop thought, and you'll see what I mean. Yeah. Always have a joyful mind. Give yourself the opportunity. Give yourself a chance. This is a part of the practice. This is one of the teachings. You have to foster a joyful mind. When you go into a tough situation, you got to be like, okay, I have to be joyful. How can I be joyful? Practice taking and sending, and look at things in a positive way. There's a lot to do. You got to learn meditation. You got to get a better job. I don't know, whatever you got to do. You got to do your stuff. But do it joyfully. That's the Buddhist way. Start really, you have to make a practice of looking at things with a joyful mind. Yay. Yeah, and there might be a lot to do. And the path is long and goes on and on. But you want to be joyful about it. I remember when I was trekking in the Himalayas, I did a 6-week trek from Jiri up to Kalapatra. And every day I would hike 10 miles. And so it's like, okay, I wake up, I climb up some mountain, and then down some mountain. And then up another mountain, and down another mountain. And it was tiring. But every day, I would wake up, and I'd be like, let's go explore the Himalayas. And I was like, wow. I mean, there was a lot to do. It was hard work. It was exhausting. But I was always excited about it. A joyful mind is satisfaction. When you're in a disposition of a joyful mind, then you're happy, even if you have to do a lot of work, even if there's hardships and obstacles and difficulties, you're happy to go through it. And even if there are obstacles, then those obstacles become a reason to get stronger. You look at the things that stop you and hurt you, and you say, you're a lesson for me in compassion. This hurts me, so I'm going to be compassionate because of this. I had a student who had this horrible boss. This was on Wall Street. This boss was mean, demanding, yelled at him all the time, and was just a difficult person to work with. But he practiced compassion for himself. So his boss would yell at him, and then he would just be like, his boss would say, do more, do more, do more, and he's all. And then he said, I became a much stronger computer programmer because I was getting pushed. And I was much stronger in my compassion because I was always practicing it. So even the obstacles can come up. But when they do, we practice compassion for ourselves. And when we have compassion for ourselves, no matter what we're going through, it creates an opening from the self-karmas that limit you to a way through the self. This is the path of selflessness, compassion for yourself. So I'd like to do the transmission of only having a joyful mind. So sit nice and straight. You can focus lightly on the third eye and look up here towards me. And we're going to sit for one song. Let's begin. I love my students. That's why I'm here. Because I see your Buddha nature. And I'm very happy to give you these teachings so that you can let go of suffering and to see enlightenment within you. Have compassion for yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. See enlightenment within you. Use humor. So, there was this one student who was learning compassion for himself. And the way that he did it was he got a joke book. This was before he can go on his phone and Google things. They didn't have phones back then. Just kidding. This is in the 90s, before the internet. Okay, so he had this big joke book that had categories of jokes. So he would bring it around in his briefcase. And then any time something bad happened and he felt bad, he would use the joke book. So one day he lost his job. I don't know why, but he lost it. And so he's like, I lost my job and it's a bummer. He's like, so I took out my joke book and went to work jokes, and he found one. And the joke was, my brother got fired from his job as a road worker. And I didn't believe it at first, because he was such a good worker at working on the road. And then I asked him, why did they fire you? And he said, they were telling me, or they fired me because they said I was stealing. And he's like, oh, wow, that's terrible. He's like, I don't believe it. But then he went home and all the signs were there. Okay, there's another one. He was at the office at his next job, and he was going into a conference room that had a glass door, and he didn't notice there was a glass door. So he walked right into the glass door, bonk, right? And then he goes, oh, you idiot, walked into a door. And he got frustrated, and he goes, wait, the joke book. Opened it up, found a joke. Okay, so Winnie the Pooh comes over to Piglet. And he goes, how you doing, Piglet? Piglet goes, bad. He goes, why? What happened? I got kicked by a camel. Oh, that's terrible. Where did the camel kick you? Where else? In the frickin' desert. And here ends my little tirade of humor. But I like this. You know, now we have smartphones, and you can have something bad happening, immediately go, I need a joke about this. So you can have a sense of humor about your life. It's really cute. So please have compassion for yourself. Foster this practice of always only keeping a joyful mind. Learn to do this. And your mindfulness practice is this month compassion for yourself. And when you do your sitting practice, compassion for yourself. Okay, thank you all so much.